Hey everyone, it's your favorite funny SpongeBobber here, SpeedyCube64, and in this video I'm going to be explaining everything in my 100% PB so that if you're out of the loop or you just want to know what a certain trick is, how it works, you could just watch this video because obviously in the main channel video there isn't going to be enough time to explain every single trick in the run. So I'm going to do my best to explain basically everything you're going to be curious about. The first major trick comes when you leave the pineapple, and that's called fast disable, and we're going to be disabling the hand that takes SpongeBob back in bounds when you normally go out of bounds. Getting on top of the taxi pad, this is where the actual trick comes into play. So there's an invisible trigger on this taxi pad that when you touch it, the text box comes up and gives you the prompt to take the taxi. Now, because SpongeBob just happens to be able to move while he's in the slamming animation, you can jump and then slam while pushing forward in that direction, and then he moves forward while he's preparing his slam. So the text box comes up. I accept it really quickly, so it starts the whole animation of the taxi coming to take him. And normally, control of SpongeBob is locked here, and he goes into the next level. However, because we're bouncing with this slam, it actually takes us out of that prompt. It brings up the text box one more time, and this gives us control of SpongeBob again. And dropping down here, this is kill sand, and if you stand on kill sand for 2 seconds, the hand will grab you. So I turn this way, and so now what that has done, that preparation has done, is it's basically turned this that invisible trigger I mentioned earlier. Instead of bringing up that text box when we touch it, now what it's going to do is it's going to instantly load the level when SpongeBob touches it. And because normally you're already here and it locks control of you, the game is just going to assume that you are already touching it, so nothing funky usually happens. But in this case, we can have the hand drag us into that, and as soon as we touch the trigger, we start loading the next level. Now, while the hand is on screen, SpongeBob can't be grabbed again, because it doesn't make sense. Why would he start getting grabbed again if he's already in the middle of getting grabbed? But since we exited the level with the hand on screen, now the game's going to interpret it as being permanently on screen, and so that's why the hand is disabled. So now going into out of bounds air triggers is going to not cause the hand to grab you anymore, but standing on this kill sand for too long is going to grab you. So the thing that makes fast disable fast is that, number one, you only have to get grabbed by the hand once instead of twice, and number two, we talked to Patrick on the way to doing this. So this 5-second walking section to go to Patrick, you don't have to do that again because you can warp to him later. So this is basically, it saves something like 5 seconds over the original method, which got grabbed twice. Normally there's an air trigger down there, a death zone, whatever you want to call it, where you get grabbed, but instead we do that. We just jump into it because the hand's disabled. And so this does two things. One, you get the spatula, and number two, you get the task in the pause menu. We haven't talked to Gary yet, but the task is still there because we got that spatula early, which means we can warp to it and skip part of the level. But we're not actually going to be doing that until later. This is a bit of movement here, you might not realize it, but basically we're going to take this tight line without getting grabbed. So when I mentioned earlier that when you stand on kill sand for 2 seconds, you get grabbed. However, it's a bit more nuanced than that. The timer starts when you touch kill sand for the first time. So right here, the timer's at 0 seconds still because I didn't touch the kill sand yet. That makes sense. So I touched it, and now the timer started. However, you have to be, number one, the timer has to reach 2 seconds, and number two, you also have to be on kill sand after that 2-second timer is over for you to get grabbed. So the timer will go 0, 1, and then it'll almost hit 2, but then we jump off again, so now it's at 2, so if we land here again, we would get grabbed, but since I'm in the air, it doesn't matter. So that's how we can kind of spend as much time over this kill stand as possible without getting grabbed. And if you get grabbed, you have to disable the hand again. But anyway, for whatever reason, this part of the street is not kill stand. This middle part of the street here. Also, for whatever reason, this part of the street, you can see his shadow is not completely there. The part that his shadow is on, it's not ground. It's just, it has no collision. There's an invisible wall that's separating SpongeBob and this area right here, which is supposed to be just decoration. But what we're going to do is we're going to do some tight jump to go under the invisible wall. This is called street jump. For some reason, this part doesn't have collision either. It's kind of a miracle that this trick even works. But yeah, this is a pretty precise trick, and it caused a lot of my runs to reset. But luckily, I just got it first try. The most important thing about getting this trick down is the timing of your spin here and the timing of your second jump out of the spin. They're not quite frame perfect, but they are pretty tricky to time. But once we're here, we can go to the second hub world. And the reason why we want to go to these other hub worlds is because the spatulas in there just happen to be quicker to get than the ones in the levels at the beginning. And the reason why we want to get these spatulas right now is because we can put off the beginning spatulas for when we have powers. When we have the powers, we can cruise boost and we can go faster. And, you know, the bigger the level is, the more time you'll save by collecting it with cruise boosting. So right now is just treedome. It's a combat challenge. But what we're going to do after killing all of these robots is we're going to do a SAS, S-A-S, spatula animation skip. So right now that we've killed these robots, there's a big ass trigger here. And if we touch this trigger, it'll make Sandy give us the spatula. But what we're going to do is cheese this. We're going to go up onto the top of the door. We're going to walk off, hit the trigger, like press R to exit the level, and the door takes a little while to actually send you back. So SpongeBob is falling. He gets the text box, which again allows you to regain control of him, and you can walk into the spatula. Then the door's little animation ends and it sends you back into Bikini Bottom. So that skips the 6-second cutscene, or not cutscene, the 6-second celebration dance thingy that SpongeBob does when he collects a spatula. So that's a nifty little time save right there. That's treedome sass. And the next trick is called a rollbuck, or rolling bucket. And again, there's an invisible wall separating hub 2 and hub 3. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go over it, but not only are we gonna go over it, we're gonna go over it in such a way that also allows us to collect the spatula on top of the chum bucket. So SpongeBall storage. So you notice how SpongeBob touched that sponge ball, but he's not actually, he's not transformed yet. And the reason why is because this little crouch that SpongeBob does after he lands on the ground after a double jump, that delays this transformation into the sponge ball. And so we can jump out of it. So SpongeBob needs to be on ground and not in that double jump animation thing. So you delay the sponge ball with a crouch, you cancel the crouch with a jump, and since you're in the air, you can't transform. So we're going to keep doing this all the way until we get to this platform here. And the sponge ball is pretty hard to control, but while SpongeBob is transforming, you can control him a lot easier. It's just a lot more, he turns a lot more quickly. And so we can take advantage of this by instantly going to the edge of this platform and then snapping back. And also note that he gets a lot of speed, and the acceleration is a lot faster when you're transforming into the sponge ball rather than when you actually are the sponge ball. This can be done if you mess up your transformation. This can be done as the sponge ball, but it's just slower, without taking advantage of the transformation. But yeah, this wall has really janky collision. There's a part of this wall where if you hit it, it just sends you flying off to the left, and the trick is kind of ruined. But yeah, avoiding that, you get luckily you get a good bounce off of this, and then you can collect the spatula on top of the chum bucket. So normally you're supposed to press a bunch of buttons on the ground that spawn in platforms that allow SpongeBob to climb from Patrick's Rock to Squidward's house to SpongeBob's house, but you can just climb it using some janky collision here. A lot of things in this game you can just kind of stand on, even though it's not really very expected that you can stand on them. But yeah, we saved this little music stand for last because we're going to do this trick. This is a kind of a cutscene overlap. Well, there's the celebration animation I talked about earlier, and there's also a cutscene to spawn the sock in. SpongeBob has already collected the spatula, and notice his bubble wand is going to hit the music stand, which is going to start the cutscene to spawn the sock. So you basically get these both done at the same time. So you notice the cutscene happens, and then SpongeBob finishes up his celebration. So the reason I wait at this oil bot here is because I want these trampolines to be in the right spot so that I can go here, and then for some reason when you're going fast and aiming directly into here, you can kind of stand on this block momentarily. So you do that, and then you jump, or not jump, I bash and slam onto the trampoline. Or like the whole thing that's funny about this trick is that normally most runners don't do it that way. Where they wait at the oil bot and then do a bash and slam. Most runners will jump onto these spikes and then catch the previous trampoline cycle. But I just do it this way because I find it easier. Another thing worth mentioning is that this game has a feature called coyote time, which basically means that you can, even if you walk off a ledge for a little bit, you still have the ability to do grounded moves like the bash and the jump and all that. You still are treated as being on ground even if you walk off a ledge for a little bit of time. This game specifically has 15 frames of coyote time, which means you can walk off a ledge for 15 frames. And that's why even though you might only be on this actually on this block for a handful of frames, I can still do it even though like I'm technically not on ground. I'm like way far below this block, but I can still bash because I have those coyote frames. We're gonna do get another 2 quick spatulas, and this trick is called oil skip. And you see these, like this area on the left, are basically going to be damage boosting all the way over to that. So when SpongeBob gets hit by something, in this case we're setting up this oil bubble to hit us in a very precise spot. When SpongeBob gets hit, he gets momentum. He gets sent flying this way, and the only thing that can really cancel his momentum is, number 1, his damage animation has to be over, and number 2, he has to be standing on ground. So SpongeBob still has momentum here because he's in the air. He touches the ground briefly, but that's okay because he's still in the damage animation. Now he's out of the damage animation, but now he's not on ground. So now he leaves the damage animation, but he still has momentum because he's not on the ground. However, we have these 15 coyote frames that I was talking about. So I can still do this grounded move, which is a bash. And I still have all this momentum that I already had from... I still have all this momentum from the oil guy hitting me. So that's how I can get this bash to bring me up with like a crazy amount of momentum. And then the double jump just lets me get over to the island and grab the spatula. So this is like 3 expensive clams you're skipping, which is pretty good. And you normally have to go through this huge slide in order to get the spatula. But there's like a spherical trigger here, which acts as a checkpoint. So when you die, you respawn on it. And this spherical trigger can be touched by just like mashing A and going underneath this acorn. So now our checkpoint, our respawn point, is set to be on top of the acorn. And so when I die, Sandy will respawn at the top of this acorn and she can get the spatula without having to go on this slide. But when you unlock a level, there's a cutscene that plays. So there's basically 2 triggers around this taxi pad. The first one is a big trigger, and it plays the cutscene that unlocks the level. The second one is the smaller trigger that actually brings up the text box and lets you warp there. But what we're doing is we want to touch both of these triggers at the same time, and the only place on this taxi pad where those two triggers overlap is like back here. We can touch the trigger that unlocks the level, and then while that happens, we land on the trigger that brings up the text box. And so that saves like, I don't know, like 1 to 2 seconds to do that. Now there's another cutscene trigger here, and we're just going to be going out of bounds to avoid it. Normally, you'd get grabbed here, but because we disabled the hand earlier, we can just be here. However, this is kill stand, so we need to make sure that we don't get grabbed by standing on the kill stand for too long. So we jump here, we start the 2-second timer, it starts now, and then at here, it's almost 2 seconds, but then we jump again, so now it's 2 seconds, but we're in the air, so we can't get grabbed. And then this part, for whatever reason, doesn't count as kill stand, so we don't get grabbed. And that's the Goo Lagoon cutscene skip. There's that sock on top of the lifeguard stand right here. But what we're gonna do is we're going to do a damage boosted frame perfect triple jump in order to get that sock. So when SpongeBob takes damage, there's one frame where he's on the ground and he can do grounded moves. Right here, this is the one grounded frame where his damage animation's over, he's on the ground, and he can do a single jump or a bash or a bubble ball, but in this case we're going to do a single jump. And this is one frame, so it's a 60th of a second. And also worth noting is that there are 5 different damage animations that SpongeBob can have, and one of them happens to be 2 frames longer than the rest of them. The good news is that all these damage animations go in a cycle, and another good thing is that if you miss this, it's not that big of a deal. You just try the trick again. But yeah, get the sock here, and then this is Sponge Glide. This is one of those tricks where I don't think anyone knows with 100% confidence how it works. Slamming with momentum is kind of weird, especially when you're like touching something. And in this case, you just kind of get stuck, but you keep your momentum, but you get stuck vertically, so you don't land. So now SpongeBob is just in this state where he looks absolutely horrifying, but he has a lot of momentum and he's floating, so you can move to this other side of the island here. So this sponge glide trick allows us to not only hit this robot at the top of the pile of boxes, which skips the connect the towers puzzle challenge, but it also is huge because it allows us to do the entirety of Goo Lagoon backwards. And here's what I mean by that. So some levels have a circular pattern of like their areas which are placed. So in this case, let's say 1 is the Goo Lagoon beach, 2 is the caves, and 3 is the pier. Normally, you have to go on the beach, you have to go to the end of that area, go to the beginning of the caves, go through the caves, go from the end of the caves to the beginning of the pier, and then go from the end of the pier to this little island section right here, which is intended to be like the last area you see in Goo Lagoon. Now, if you can go from this first area to the third area, which is unintentional, it speeds up spatula collection by a lot, and you'll see that later. So basically we're going to do a damage boost to get over here, and if you're wondering why the principles of like damage boosting, like bash boosting, don't apply here, like for example, SpongeBob's damage animation is over, why does he still have momentum? I don't know. Maybe the platform has lower friction or something, who knows. I don't think anyone's explained that in a way that makes sense to me. But anyway, yeah, here's this teeter-totter, which allows us to get from area 1 to area 3 right here. Notice this box over here. This is a teleport box. And once you reach the end of the level, you're supposed to be able to go from the end back to the start. And this is good because, like, in a casual playthrough, it means that you don't have to go back and go through all of this stuff again. So it basically just makes traveling through the levels a lot more convenient for the casual player. So normally we would have to go through this entire pier, but because of that exploit, we started out at the end of the level, And so now we can just warp straight to the start. We still are going to have to go back and do some spatulas in the pier later, but some movement is going to be cut out of it because of this exploit here. So since we're entering Goo Lagoon Sea Caves from the end, you can see the spatula is right there. And once we get the spatula, we're going to have the warp that takes us to the beginning of the sea caves. So basically, instead of having to move through the entirety of the sea caves, we don't have to move through as much of it because we're cutting out some sections due to this whole Goo Lagoon backwards thing. So that's great. And then we're going to do this jump here to get this last sock, which you can maybe barely see it. But basically this ledge has a part of it that sticks out, so you can kind of land on it here. You can see like the little part that like cuts off, I don't know what you call it, but like this little side part, you can stand on that too. And it actually extends even like past this wall, so you can, this jump that looks like it should be impossible is suddenly made possible. We enter from area 2 to area 1. You can see the spatula is right here. Here's a cool thing about the bubble bowl. The momentum of the bubble bowl, the speed at which SpongeBob lurches forward during the bowling shot, actually depends on how fast SpongeBob is moving right before the bubble bowl. So since this platform is moving him pretty fast, when he does the bubble bowl, he'll be bowling pretty fast. And you can see that's a lot longer of a bowling like shot than he normally goes. And pay attention, that concept for the bowling shot, like the speed here depends on how fast you were moving right before. That concept is the most important thing in this game. The most important tech. It's the backbone of like all speed tech in this game. Or almost all speed tech in this game. I shouldn't say all. So remember the whole like 15 coyote frames thing that I brought up like twice earlier? It also applies to Patrick too. So Patrick is not standing on this ledge right now, but it's fine because he is still considered kinda on ground, so he can grab this, this stone tiki here. And so in this case, we're doing something called tiki juggling. Because you can only carry one stone tiki at a time, we kind of have to get sort of creative in order to bring both of these tikis to the skee ball machine at once, which is what we want to do to set up this SBA trick. So we need to make sure that when we're throwing these tikis, we don't accidentally auto-target to throw this tiki on top of that tiki, because you can't grab a tiki off of another tiki if there's nothing nearby to give you those like coyote frames that I talked about earlier. So if you accidentally stack one tiki on top of another, you kind of have to drown and retry the trick again, which sucks. But yeah, so now that we're on this platform where the skee ball machine is, we're going to do a precise setup to make the tiki land inside the machine and get caught on this 30 hole right here. So right there, that's what you want to see. Its eyes are kind of completely covered. And we can throw this other one. This one is not precise because of the auto-targeting thing. We have these stone tikis here that would set up, and this bowling ball should spawn right here because it gets placed like in front of SpongeBob when he does the bowling shot. You can see it's already in there. So it kind of clipped through that, and since it's inside the skee ball machine, it can't be broken by these stone tikis. So even though it hit the stone tikis, it's fine. Every frame, it's going to go in and out of the trigger that gives SpongeBob the shiny objects. So it's going to go in on one frame, out on the other, in, out, in, out. In here, the rate isn't that great, but it gets 900 shiny objects every second in if you do the trick perfectly. Another thing to note is that this trick requires the hand to be disabled as well, because normally the hand would grab you and take you out of there. Because just like real life skee ball, you can't just go into the machine and put the balls in. That's cheating. Now, clean out the bumper boats has two parts to it. One of them is actually cleaning out the bumper boats. The other part is taking out this tiki stand with a robot in it. So what we're going to do to maximize the speed of that is we're going to use some of Patrick's coyote frames to break both of those bottom wooden tikis at once, and then grab this thunder tiki and then throw it at the stand but we're going to throw it when Patrick is off the ledge. He's gonna fall into the goo and drown. As you can see, there's normally a cutscene that plays, but we're skipping the cutscene because we drowned. Here's mermalair slide skip. Now, normally what you're supposed to do is a bunch of puzzle shit to go unlock a bridge that spawns here, and this bridge will take you to a trigger that takes you to the prawn boss fight, which is supposed to be the very end of mermalair. However, we're going to be doing this in the middle because the trigger to take you to the boss fight is like always there. The bridge just isn't always there, but we can use our slide speed to do this, to access the trigger early. We're not actually going to be fighting prawn just yet, but what's good about this is, number one, it gives us the warp so we can go here later, and number two, it gets us onto this area without having to do the puzzle required to get to this area. The damage animation interrupts the bash animation, and it ends earlier, so after this damage animation we can jump onto this little part that sticks out of this, I don't even know what to call this thing, this little laser ball, spiky ball thing, and get onto here. Now, this is the Thunder Tiki lag ball, and it's a pretty cool trick. If you can guess, a lot of particles on screen, it lowers the frame rate. Now that the frame rate is lower, the bowling ball that SpongeBob threw is going to move more distance in a frame to kind of make it up. Think of it as like distance equals speed times time, and since the time in a frame is longer because the frame rate decreased, now it takes longer to process a frame, so the ball is going to move farther in that frame. Because of this lag, we can make the bowling ball clip in to being from outside the cage to hitting the button in one frame. Goo Lagoon is like this, with like being like a circle. Some levels, like SpongeBob's Dream, are kind of like this, where like it kind of branches off like a tree. But mermalair is pretty weird. Mermalair's layout is this. So 1 is the lobby, 2 is the computer room, 5 is the prawn boss fight, and then 3 is the security tunnel, 4 is the ballroom. And you might be thinking, can't we do something like this? Like going from the computer room straight to the ballroom and then do the security tunnel backwards? There's no trigger that takes SpongeBob all the way from the computer room to the ballroom in one shot. Like this, it just doesn't exist. It's not possible. You have to go through the security tunnel first. But anyway, the reason we go on top of this taxi pad here is because, again, it's another overlap between unlocking the level and getting the text box to actually take the taxi there. Similar to what we did in Goo Lagoon when we jumped behind the taxi pad. In Rock Bottom, the tricks here are actually pretty straightforward to understand with what I've told you such far. This is kind of just another sliding bash similar to Oil Skip, with the momentum kind of extended a little by that hot sauce. Right here, this is another sliding bash similar to Oil Skip, and that's all that's done in Rock Bottom 1. We did this part. This is the part we did in Rock Bottom 1, and then in Rock Bottom 2 we're going to be doing more of this area. We're going to be doing all of this area and then more of this area. Here I'm going to get this Sandman sock, and what's actually pretty cool about this is that we can slide on this ice while the cutscene happens. You have to be on the ground and moving forward when the cutscene starts, so that's why I wait until I'm on the ice and I'm started moving, and now I can hit the Sandman. This spiky ball, whatever you want to call it, damages Sandy in whatever direction she flies into it in, and momentum is conserved through swingers. So you can get onto those Texas swingers and jump off, and you'll still be going fast with your damage momentum. So here we're going to make this fight a lot more convenient for us. We're going to take out the chuck. So I hit this this fodder, that's what it's called, into both of those G-loves. Like, it kind of like creates a domino effect and takes them all out, which is pretty nice. Again, this fight has a lot of RNG in it, so you have to kind of adapt, but if you follow the rules I said earlier, which is, you know, you take out the chuck first and then you hit the other robots into the G-loves, it's not that bad of a fight. So when you activate the cruise bubble and the bubble ball on the same frame, the bubble ball starts and then it is interrupted by the cruise bubble. And so basically, since it's interrupted, the bubble ball technically never ends. And so the game thinks constantly that you're doing a bubble bowl, like you're in that bowling state. And a consequence of this is that your momentum never goes away. Even when you're jumping around, like doing grounded moves, doing whatever, your momentum still almost never goes away. So basically, your momentum from canceling that bubble bowl gets added as a constant to SpongeBob's speed, whatever he is doing. SpongeBob's bubble bowling speed depends on how fast he was moving right before that bubble bowl started. But so since we're flat up against a wall, SpongeBob didn't really move a whole lot. And so our bubble bowling speed is going to be pretty slow. And as a consequence, our cruise boost is also going to be pretty slow. But luckily, it doesn't matter what direction that movement was in right before SpongeBob started the bubble bowl. If he's moving really fast to the side or backwards, the bubble bowl will still be pretty fast. It doesn't have to be forward movement. So what we can do here is we can start the cruise bubble, and then we can start cruise boosting. We can do our first cruise boost facing the wall, and then we can move to the side. And by moving to the side, we can use our next bubble bowl to capture SpongeBob's full walking speed. And so the next cruise boost is going to give you just as much momentum as if SpongeBob were just walking. So now we have SpongeBob's walking speed captured in the bubble bowl. Now it's added as a constant to SpongeBob's a normal speed, whatever it's doing. Also, you can get rid of a cruise boost by bubble bowling again, taking damage, dying, exiting the level, or switching characters. So you'll see here in a second, SpongeBob slams, and normally the bubble slam is supposed to be a stationary move. You're not supposed to be able to move at all during it. But since he's cruise boosting, he's moving forward just as fast as he would be as if he were walking. Right here, this is a cruise boost facing to the side. It works the exact same as a normal cruise boost, except the animation for the second cruise bubble gets canceled a tiny bit earlier because SpongeBob tries to face forward, he moves too far, and then he gets unstuck from the wall and his cruise bubble animation gets canceled basically. So that's called an RCB, or reverse cruise boost. It's not quite reverse, but we just call it that for historical reasons. But it works the exact same as a normal cruise boost. So you can see SpongeBob's bashing, and again, since bashing is normally supposed to be a stationary move, but the cruise boost adds speed to it, so now it becomes kind of like a super jump. Ledge cruise boosting is a form of cruise boosting that actually can go faster than SpongeBob's walking speed. So it takes me 2 tries to get this ledge cruise boost because it's a tough trick. So basically, when SpongeBob slides off a ledge like this, you notice that he gets a lot of displacement in this one frame here. Right there. He moves a lot more than he would if he was just walking from side to side. When I say that SpongeBob's bowling speed depends on how fast he was moving right before, specifically, it depends on how much he moved the frame before the cruise boost was activated. Since SpongeBob moved a lot more, the bowling speed that is captured is going to be a lot faster. And so this cruise boost actually ends up being around 12 speed, I'd say. And 12 speed is more than twice as fast as SpongeBob is walking. So to put this into perspective, SpongeBob's walking speed is 5 speed. And a 12 speed cruise boost would mean that a speed equivalent to over twice his walking speed is now being added as a constant to however fast he is moving normally. So basically, if you're holding forward, you can take the 12 plus 5 equals 17, and you can basically it basically means that SpongeBob has the potential to move up to 3 times as fast as his normal speed. This is Ice Pillar Bash. So you want to start off by landing on this little thingy, which is just like, it has, you know, you could stand on it for whatever reason. You want to slide a little to the left, like this, just to get as high as possible. You want to bash, and then free yourself from being behind the pillar at the right time. Man, this is hard to explain. Another thing to note is that cruise boosting, because cruise boosting is basically makes the game think that you're bowling, it stores downward momentum. So however much downward momentum you had landing on a platform, you're going to, if you run off that platform, you're going to fall down at that same amount of speed. You're not going to like drop off. If you might just shoot downward instantly if you walk off the platform, because of how cruise boosting preserves downward momentum. So since we have a cruise boost active, we don't want to catch onto this slide early, because if we catch onto the slide during the prep for the slam, then SpongeBob will have a lot of downward momentum stored, and once he's off of here, he'll just shoot downward, and you won't have enough height to make it onto this ice pillar. But if you can slam first, the prep for the slam is over, and then the slam starts and lands on the slide, then SpongeBob won't have as much downward momentum, and so the landing lag ends. You move to the left, and during these 15 coyote frames, you can bash and then slam onto the pillar. Now, if you're too far forward, you won't get the height necessary to slam onto the pillar. You'll be short. But if you're too far back, you'll catch onto this slide and accidentally preserve a bunch of downward momentum, and so you won't be able to make the bash onto the pillar anyway, because you'll do this slam and then you'll just shoot down here, like you'll boosh, and then you won't be able to make it onto the pillar. So it's a pretty tight trick. You need to be like in this Goldilocks zone of not being too far back, not being too far forward. It's a lot harder than it looks, but it's something you can get consistent with practice. This cruise boost right here is the hardest cruise boost in the run. It took me 8 tries to get it in this run. What makes this cruise boost so hard is that not only is it an LCB, which already means you have to hit your cruise bubble on a specific frame, you have to hit your inputs later than most cruise bubbles. This is the end of the first cruise bubble animation, and then you're going to be sliding for 1, 2, 3 frames. You can see that's the big displacement, and then you capture that with the cruise boost. The timing is just kind of wacky. You have to wait specifically 3 frames, whereas the other one, it's just 1 frame of waiting. This cruise boost is about like 20 speed, which means it's 4 times as fast as SpongeBob can walk in the cruise boost alone. In the other 2 slides, you can just be on the ground, bash over the gate, but for some reason, the gate has an abnormally high wall hitbox here. You gotta wait for these tikis to be at a specific position, bash, slam to get a glide at a specific height, and then go over to this, which also has some like floor hitboxes on it, and then this ceiling kind of pushes you down and lets you go onto the invisible wall. This is another LCB. So here is just another instance of abusing coyote time to do moves that you normally wouldn't be able to do on a slide. But yeah, we're collecting all the sandmen to get 1 sock, and then we also need to go up to the top of the slide at the end to get another sock, which is called the pipe sock. There's some pretty hard movement at the end of this that allows you to do both in one go. And so it's right here. You can see here's the 7th one, here's the 8th one, but now we need to go all the way up to the top of the slide. So how do we do this? Step 1, we damage. This gets rid of the tongue animation. Fall off the slide when the damage animation ends to get coyote frames. jump back onto the slide. Now we have less momentum. And then we make this jump, which is more precise than it looks. If you're too far back, you'll miss the slide. You won't make the jump. And if you're too far forward, you'll accidentally jump into this pillar, and you won't make it over there either. So yeah, pretty tough. And then from here, you take damage on top of these spikes, which again removes the tongue sliding animation from you, which means you can now do the jump and the spin to get onto there. And then this part just happens to have collision, so we can get on top of the pipe. And yeah, that's pipe sock. All that for like saving 20 seconds over the other method, which is to run up the slide with the LCB. But hey, every second counts. So I'm gonna get SpongeBob wedged into this cage, and then I'm gonna have him do and then I'm going to go from holding down on the D-pad to holding down and left. And since this is a different angle than the one that got him wedged, it sends him out here in one frame. Since SpongeBob moves such a large distance in one frame, the bubble bowl that would come out on this frame would be really fast. And another side effect of using the cruise bubble is that it actually gives you one frame with no collision. So we're going to do the bubble bowl and the cruise bubble at the same time. And this isn't going to do a cruise boost, but it's going to be doing something called an L bowl. And it's a bowling shot with the first frame not having any collision to it, but just because of cruise bubble jank. So as you see on the next frame, we're going to just bowl into the cage here. That's because of our no collision from the cruise bubble. Here's prawn skip. It works by activating a debug trigger outside of the boss fight. So you can get out of bounds by having a cruise boost active and then mashing L. This is L clipping, and it works because of that whole thing with cruise bubble giving you one frame of no collision. And also because of the way the ceiling is, it just tends to get SpongeBob stuck in it. It doesn't want to push SpongeBob out. It's kind of like a low ceiling, so it just works that way. But yeah, we can move on this out of bounds geometry and then touch that debug trigger, which ends the fight. This is a spatula called Save the Children, and since these floating balloon kids is on a cycle, you need to get your cruise boost on the first try, or else you have to reload the level and try again, because otherwise you won't be able to hit all of them quickly enough. But yeah, it's kind of unusual for me to miss it now, but it does happen. It's not an easy segment. It's like a lot of moving targets you gotta hit, and it's kind of hard to back up. The next section here is out of bounds moat, and first we just get the sock, and then we go into here. Now you might notice there's a low ceiling here, and similar to prawn skip, we can use just that to L clip, and now we're out of bounds, or kind of inside the sandcastle, underneath the goo. So normally we'd have to push a button to make the platforms rise, but we don't have to do that here. We can just kind of jump under that little ground there and get the spatula. Here you can see there's a pressure plate, and you can see that there's this, so the pressure plate will lift that up, and then there's bowling pins underneath there, so you can use the bubble ball move to knock the bowling pins down. It makes the sock come down. But the sock's just chilling in the air. You can always get it. Since spinning resets vertical momentum, you can spin, and so cruise boosting it normally preserves downward momentum, but since I spun here, I don't have any downward momentum at all. So when I run off this platform, I'm going to actually be able to get some good distance off of it, and I'm not just going to shoot down instantly. This is a spatula animation skip. I tried to go for it twice and then failed. But anyway, the way it works is you want to activate the gate to open the caves, and then while that little animation is playing, you want to glide into the spatula and just barely touch it before the animation ends and you load into the caves. Similar to how that treedome sass worked, except in this case, your cruise boost is what's pushing you in. You don't regain control of SpongeBob. But your angle needs to be just right before you actually activate the loading zone. And in this case, it was just a little bit off, And actually it was kind of a lot off. It was like really bad, but whatever. This LCB right here is a smaller part of a bigger strat called funnyless. And the way it works is you actually have to get the LCB first, which in this case it takes me 2 tries. And then for some reason you can get a rise and glide off of this wall. And I don't know why it rises up like that. I don't know why a vertical sponge glide works the way it does. Again, it's not fully explained, but you can just kind of do it. And then you go above this waterfall. This is kind of like out of bounds. And you stop yourself on this like ceiling right there. And then you can glide to this part, which is just perfectly aligned to let you do that. Now you can use like these like parts of the rocks that are like sticking out of the caves. You gotta jump specifically on those to be able to keep standing. But yeah, you can get the sock from out of bounds, and that skips having to go in the cave and like do the challenges and get the sock that way. So kelp forest is another one of these circular zones, but in this case it has 4 zones instead of just 3. And so this exploit allows us to go from 1 to 4. This is actually a lot simpler than all the other like backwards level exploits. We just have to go here, going on to here, because again, it's assumed that you can only go here once you've already done all the other content in this level. Puts a little trampoline down here, so you can go back up. So going here right now is when the trampoline spawned. And as you can see, after I collected the spatula, I'm going to warp to through the woods, and the trampoline is going to be there. It lets me go to the last area. We can do a little slide skip here, or rather a time challenge skip. We're going to activate the timer and then go straight to the end, because this is not like Mario Kart. There aren't checkpoints that you have to worry about. You can just go straight to the end, and Mermaid Man considers it a finished race because he's senile. He can't tell the difference. So yeah, you just go to the end of the track, and then Mermaid Man's like, yep, you did it. And yeah, when you're on a slide, the game is trying its hardest to push you this way, so you can't just jump up the slide. However, we already have some momentum going forward from cruise boosting. With the correct rhythm, we can prevent the slide from pushing us too far back, and then we can get the sock and warp out. And that cuts a corner rather than having to go all the way like around the slide. And in this section, you have to parkour on all of these like bits and pieces of the rocks that stick out of the level. So it's not easy by any means, but with a lot of practice, and I mean like a lot of practice, you can get decently consistent at this. And yeah, so the cool thing about this is that there's nothing frame perfect about it. There's no one part of it that's like super hard, but it's just it's like really tough movement for like a good minute, and like it's pretty cool and it's really satisfying to pull off. So I'm glad I did this first try in the run, because it's pretty nice. And once we've gotten the last crystal, we can get back in bounds by having Barnacle Boy's text box bring us back in. Squid's Dream is another level that's cycle based, so you have to get the cruise boost within 3 tries, which isn't too bad, but then your movement depends on how early you got the cruise boost. In this case, I got the cruise boost on the first try, so I'm going to wait around for a bit on this trampoline here just to kill some time so that the platform is there once I get to it. So there are 2 types of trampolines in this game, scripted and unscripted. The unscripted ones don't lock control of SpongeBob during them. So you can move in whatever direction in the air you want to when you jump on an unscripted trampoline. When you jumped on a scripted trampoline, it kind of forces you in one direction. However, if you have a cruise boost active, the scripted part, like the part where it intends for you to go, is overwritten by the cruise boost momentum. So this scripted trampoline wants to send me in this direction, but my cruise boost momentum is going to take me in this direction. So I'm going to go up on top of here instead of going down here. And I can use this to basically cut across some of the level and save a little bit of time. For some reason, you can collect the sock from under here. This right here is another instance of cutting content by getting the spatula and then warping to its task, even though you technically haven't really started it yet. So you can see I warped there, and now I'm higher than I was before. This here is just like the wall having weird collision, and you can stand on it at some points. In this split, I messed up and lost like another 20 seconds. So I didn't go far enough to the right, like sliding off of this cannon. And so I ended up hitting my head on the underside of this sail. So I did the backup movement, which is just to go onto these platforms. However, in this case, I just so happened to press the jump button a little too early. And so I didn't want to risk it, and I just went off the ship. I just went back onto the ship and tried again. Normally, you're supposed to destroy all of the robot ship's cannons, but normally you're supposed to destroy the laser cannons on the robot ship and then go back and press this button, which will take you to the Flying Dutchman fight. However, when you press this button, for whatever reason, it gives you the warp, even though you didn't successfully destroy the robot ship. Now, Dutchman skip uses a debug trigger above the player's spawn point, kind of like prawn skip, but there's a little more involved in this. There's no clipping out of bounds, but this bash right here, it's kind of easy to hit your head on the underside of that, so it's not free. And then this bash, you have to be on like the very highest point of this plank, which is like right here, and you have to turn very precisely. Not only do you have to turn far to the right in order to actually get to here, but you also need to then immediately turn back to the left so you don't fall off during the slam's like landing lag at the end. Also, the timing of the slam needs to be pretty good too. You need to do it like right at the peak of your bash, because if you do it too early or too late, you just won't have enough height. But then yeah, you could just jump into the debug trigger to end the fight. I'm not gonna pretend I know why this works, but if you do, if you do the bubble bowl in such a way so that it goes on top of the cage, and then you bash, you fall down, and you kind of clip through this like just barely enough to get the spatula. This boss fight is a lot more intricate than it seems, but because we have the cruise bubble, and we're not supposed to be here with the cruise bubble, but we just are. For some reason, it takes damage with the cruise bubble, so we can actually just hit him in the face 3 times. At the end of this slide, you can use your coyote frames to get a little more distance, and then touch the spatula, but don't land on the platform. I land on the kill sand here, so that SpongeBob gets grabbed. And it's actually good because you want the hand enabled for the last part of the run, because having the hand enabled can be used to skip some cutscenes. This here is another instance of just overlapping the cutscene with the text box. You already know how that works. Getting wedged between these 2 tikis and the rock kind of puts SpongeBob in this state where he's going forward on one frame, back on the next. Like he's forward, he moves back, he moves forward, he moves back. And since this is a relatively large displacement, you can capture that displacement with the cruise boost. And since he's alternating forward and backwards, it's called an alternating cruise boost, or an ACB. It's actually a 50-50 if you get it or not. I think it's like if you're at the front, you get the cruise boost. If you're in the back, you just get the bowl. So this cruise boost is 15 speed. Which means it's like 3 or 4 times faster than SpongeBob's walking speed, and it makes collecting this objectives in this level a lot more fun. It can be done with a normal cruise boost, and it doesn't lose a lot of time. In fact, I'm not sure how much this even saves, but it's pretty cool, so I just go for it anyway because I like doing it. The game wants to stop us from using this trampoline to get to the spatula. And if we go high enough, it'll actually wall us off and stop our movement. However, if we just jump to cancel the trampoline boost, we can, not do that, and we won't get stopped. There's an invisible checkpoint on this platform. So when we get grabbed by the hand, which is one reason we had the hand enabled, we get spawned back here. So it saves time, like over having to backtrack. The jump coming up right here is kind of tight. There's a lot of ways people do it. This is, I have a very unique way of doing it. I like to jump out of here just barely so that I land on this little rim right here. I bash, and then that gives me time to move my thumb away from the buttons and turn the camera so I have a more clear view of this little pipe here, so I can land on that. And then I zoom in the camera here so that when SpongeBob follows the camera, he doesn't fall off the platform. So we're gonna hit these duplicated trons as we're falling down, and then here's a cool little series of trick shots. So you can bowl this, and then you have to walk off really quickly, because if you hit the duplicated tron while you're still up here, it soft locks for whatever reason, and you have to reload the lighthouse. So but you do it once, and then you do it again, and so the bubble bowl is moving towards this duplicated tron, where you hit this duplicated tron, and since you hit them so quickly, basically like no enemies will spawn. The only enemy that ends up spawning is this one chuck, and we just take him out right here. And then here we take advantage of the fact that the door doesn't send us out of the lighthouse immediately, so we make the cruise boost glide SpongeBob into the spatula, and we get the spatula animation skip. On the other side of this wall, there's a button that opens that door. Like basically the frame before it touches the wall and auto cancels, we have to cancel it right there. The explosion goes through the wall and hits the button, and so it opens the door from the other side of the wall. Instead of waiting for the platform cycle here, we just hit the spatula and get grabbed, which is why we need the hand enabled. If we had the hand disabled, we wouldn't be able to do anything. We would just soft lock there. This right here is cruise bubble finesse. So you're normally supposed to actually go to these lasers as Sandy and hit them, but again, since we have the cruise bubble and we're not really intended to have the cruise bubble, we can hit these lasers from other positions to cut out as much movement as possible. We still have to go to this one laser right here to get the artwork, but we can go just on that little tiny ledge, and then we can use the cruise bubble to just barely make the distance and hit the button over there. So instead of having to go to 3 lasers, we only have to go to 1. And at this third laser, there's a really long cutscene that plays, but we can skip this. We throw our bowling shot, and then while this bubble bowl is traveling to this button, I walk and then throw another bubble bowl, and this has me going off the ledge. So I went off the ledge, and now this cutscene is going to start, and I'm gonna get grabbed during it. So instead of having to watch it, I can respawn. This museum is another cycle-based segment. If you want to make the first cycle, you have to hit the cruise boost first try. I hit it 3rd try. However, this is still fine. This segment is really easy to back up because even if you miss the cruise boost, you can just wait for the tire to swing back and forth again, so you can grab onto it and clip through the wall. And here we spin to reset our vertical momentum, and then we use our coyote frames to get as much distance as we can off of this platform, and then bash to get under the laser walls and get the spatula. Normally you're supposed to exit through the trench to hit this button, but we can just do it with the cruise bubble. Since this time challenge is different from all the others, and there's no NPC that gives us a spatula, we can actually just run straight to it without having to start the time challenge. This is the forbidden spatula, and the reason I got so many socks in early game and mid game is to push this back to late game, because otherwise doing it in early game requires a frame perfect triple jump, and I don't want to do that. This right here is the last reason we want the hand enabled. It's for Mr. Krabs' Dreams cutscene skip. When you start the level, you get this text box, and normally a cutscene plays. However, you can actually pause right before the cutscene plays because it doesn't play immediately. You have a control over SpongeBob for a little bit of time before the cutscene starts playing. So what we do is we immediately pause, and then we warp back to the spatula. So notice how when we talk to Squidward the first time, we're facing him. But when we reload the level, you'll notice now that by holding up and right, we actually have more control over where he ends up. So SpongeBob ends up here in the top right corner of this platform. And that's why we had to reload the level, because talking to Squidward the first time, we couldn't end up here. So now we can close the text box and then immediately bowl, and this sends us off the platform so that SpongeBob gets grabbed while the cutscene is playing. And now we're free. We don't have to watch the cutscene again. So this saves about 8 seconds over just watching the cutscene. The cruise bubble can be used to extend SpongeBob's invincibility frames. And since we just respawned, we have some invincibility frames. So we're going to use that to its full potential by taking out these duplicated trons. Even though these oil guys and like all these other robots are going to try and fire at me, but that doesn't matter because I'm not going to get hit because I have invincibility frames that are being extended by the cruise bubble. So taking out these 3 duplicated trons, the fight becomes a lot easier. Cruise boosting isn't necessarily done here to save the time it takes to travel a distance. Rather, it's done so that we can overlap the cutscene of the TV falling with the cutscene of unlocking the area. Similarly to Mr. Krabs' Dream, SpongeBob starts the level off with some invincibility frames, and he's doing the cruise bubble a lot, which means that he can extend it. So that's why he's not really getting hit here, because he's taking advantage of that. Now, I've said plenty of times that bowling speed depends on how far SpongeBob moved the frame before he started bowling, and the same is sort of true for jumping height. The further you move up when you started jumping, the higher your jump will be. And this is basically taken to the extreme here. This platform moves a lot, and so when SpongeBob jumps off of it, he's basically gonna go super high up. And there's a debug trigger above this fight, just like Prawn and the Flying Dutchman, and touching this debug trigger ends the fight immediately. That was Robo Sponge Kip, and here's the last part of the run, Fast Brain. So this scripted trampoline is normally supposed to send us that way, but since we have a cruise boost active, we can just go forward instead. The jump spacing here is pretty tight, and I'm honestly surprised I got it first try in this run, especially with, how insane this pace was. But yeah, you can barely land on this ledge if you slam at the edge of the trampoline and have just the right angle. This L clip is a little more complicated than the other ones, but I found that spinning on the ground allows you to more consistently clip by mashing L. So you'd spin, mash L, and then you can clip through. Other runners use it by doing an L jump, which is when you press L and jump on the same frame, which it's kind of up to them. I think the L jump might be a little faster, but the spin is more consistent. And so yeah, here we're just we're gonna use one last L clip through, and we're gonna break the 3 fuses to end the run. And yeah, there we go. Wow, that took a while. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you're still confused on anything, because I know I did not do the best job at those explanations. And yeah, stay speedy. Peace.